We talked with Paige Pumphrey, a New York City-based illustrator specializing in pinup-styled artwork that is heavily influenced by American comic books and animation, tattoos, and mid-century designs. She's most well known for providing artwork for roller derby bouts, gig posters, and burlesque shows and comic book pinups. She has also been very successful in promoting her style as a brand, and we asked her advice on what artists could do to promote themselves. She has some great words of wisdom that any artist and designer could learn from. So sit back and enjoy. So, all right, this is it. Here we are. Welcome, everybody. Storycomic Presents, episode 15. And we have with us Paige Pumphrey. Is that how you say your last name, right? Paige
Pumphrey, yes. It's
okay.
like Humphrey, but with a P.
Okay, yeah. Paige Pumphrey. And for those that know, Paige, she's a New York City-based illustrator. She specializes in pinup styled artwork that is heavily influenced by American comic books and animation, tattoos, and as she says, mid-century ephemera. And also, too, she's most well known for providing artwork for, you say roller derby, gig posters, burlesque shows, and comic book pinups. So thank you, Paige, for joining us. It's very excited to sit down and talk to you.
Hi, hello.
So let's just jump right in, and have you kind of like talk to the audience and kind of give everybody a bit of a background of you and how you kind of developed your brand. So.
Yeah. Well, hi everyone. I'm Paige Pumphrey, aka Paigey. I am a illustrator and designer, artist and stuff. I live in New York City. And well, yeah, like I've had a bit of a varied career. What's it called? I grew up wanting to animate. I was a early adopter of anime back in the day, like in the in the 80s and 90s.
Was there some specific kind of like cartoons, or was there a specific type that you really kind of like gravitated towards?
Oh yeah, it was the 80s was like the golden age of Saturday morning cartoons. So there was all that good stuff. Like yes, and like early like my parents were very cool with like me watching television, especially as I once I showed an interest in drawing and animation and stuff. So it was like, oh, it's a cartoon. She can watch it unsupervised. She'll be fine. But then that was also how I got to watch stuff like Unico, which is if you know about Unico, you know about Unico, which is like this super adorable little unicorn that has two movies that are done by Sanrio, which kind of lulls you into a false sense of security of like, how adorable, this little pink-haired unicorn frolicking around the forest. And then it's just like, oh, like, and then you get to like the villains and stuff, and it's like, oh my god. But yeah, like watching stuff like that, like watching like scary, like decidedly more like adult, like edgier animation as a child, definitely like terrified me, but it also inspired me at the same time. Like I kind of learned to channel that terror into drawing better.
like some of like the old like Ralph Bashki kind of things where like
Don
stuff, yeah.
Oh yeah, Don Bluth. One of my big favorite animation people is Richard Williams, who did like he's most famous for Roger Rabbit, but he also did like the Raggedy Ann and Andy musical adventure, which was also one of my favorites as a kid, which has an utterly terrifying sequence with this character called Greedy, who's just like this amorphous blob of candy that like wants to eat the dolls, and it's just like, ooh, like I'm gonna be watching that one eye with behind the couch. But still be like, oh, that's awesome, taking notes.
So you started off, so that was kind of like so as you're saying earlier, that was you originally you fell in love with the animation piece, and that's when you started to pick up a pencil and start practicing from that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like, and it's also, and in like, especially like when you're a kid and you get into animation, and it's like, oh, well, obviously you want to like work for Disney, right? And it's like, sure. Like, well, yeah, it's like, yeah, I'm 8. Why not? Um, but then it was like, and it was interesting because I became exposed to a lot of the process of animation at a very young age, and that was actually when and all of the things of like, oh, 24 frames makes up of 24 illustrations makes up a 1 second of animation and stuff. And it was like, even at that age, I was like, heard that, and I was like, that I don't know about that. Hey, these comics are pretty cool though. But then it's like drawing comics has its own set of uh, uh, trials as well, since it's like, oh, like with animation it's like, oh, you're pretty much married to drawing one character forever, or at least like the next 5 years of your life or whatever, depending on if it's traditional or not. As opposed to like with comics, it's like, oh, do you know how to draw a car? Do you know how to draw backgrounds? Do you know how to draw all this stuff? Well, if you're going to learn, because that's what this scene calls for.
So,
But oh yeah.
I was gonna say, so what did you, how did you at a young age? So you asked the questions to learn about what animation was. How did you do that at such a young age?
I mean, like, well, like this was like back in the 80s and 90s and stuff. I kind of had to like look the stuff up in the library.
Okay.
I was very fortunate in that, like, my parents weren't very artistically inclined as far as like animation and drawing and stuff goes, but they were very supportive. And I know there was at one point we took a family vacation to Disney World, and it was like right after like MGM Studios had opened up. So I was about 10 years old. And one of the days that we were there, they actually enlisted me in like the little like junior woodchuck animation like tutorial thing for the day, which I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, and it's like you get like a little workbook, and they like you do the animation tour and stuff like that. But then, and I was like, oh, this is neat. And then it was like, once the day was over and I was reunited with my family, they're like, we had such a great day. We rode on Splash Mountain. And I'm like, I went to school. It's just like, that's okay, I guess. But you guys went on Splash Mountain. That's not fair.
So you realize, so you're kind of introduced to the concept of cartooning and art through cartoons, and
Yeah.
then realizing how actually hard cartooning, like animation was, you then decided to go into, as you say, more like the illustration and cartooning side of stuff.
Yeah, like way more of like with animation, it's like you're so like immersed into one particular thing, as opposed to like with just general illustration, it's more of a kind of a done in one sort of thing, where it's like, oh, I finished this illustration, now I can move on to the next thing. um which is which was more my speed. It was because, yeah, it was just like, oh, that's a lot. Like, I've dipped my toe a little bit in doing animations. I used to like animate little gifs and stuff like that, like several years ago. And even then I was just like, oh yeah, no, this is why I didn't want to do that. But then moving on to the things that I did want to do, where it was like I started reading. I have an older brother, and he had a lot of floppy like comics growing up, like old X-Men, and like this was like the golden age of X-Men during Claremont era and stuff. And I started reading those, and it was like, because comics are so much more, are like kind of like, they can be like such a pure form of storytelling, where there's way less people involved. There's less cooks in the kitchen. so you can do crazier stuff as opposed to animation where it's like, this is so expensive, we can't do that, we have to make sure this sells. um so it was like, yeah, I like started reading like X-Men and like all these like old weird comics and stuff like that. And then from there it was like, oh, this is the stuff right here, this is where I want to go. And through that it was like, I in like seventh grade I saw an article about in Wizard magazine, I saw an article about the Kubert School in New Jersey, and I was like, that's a place for me. I'm not like, I don't want to go anywhere else. So, and that was basically where I ended up after high school, and got like my, it's like got my like my college education's basically like boot camp for comic books.
It's, so talk to us about that. How what was the process like of going to Kubrick School, and what were some of the major takeaways that you got from that education?
Like, well, it definitely like with going to Cuber School, I made friends there. I met my husband there. That I made friends and I made connections and I forged relationships with people that like that lasted me the rest of my life, most likely. I mean, there's people that my best friends like went to Cuber School and all, and it's like, and it's interesting, especially like one of the things that they told us the first time, or like one of the first days that we were there, was all of you guys that are in this class right now, like where you came from, you were the weirdo and you were the person who was into comic books and nobody knew what you were talking about, and you were like, where, like, why doesn't anyone understand me, and all. And it's like, now you are here and you are with all the other people that understand you, so now it's like, oh, like you kind of have to start realizing like, oh, being into comics and stuff isn't a personality trait. Now I have to like work on like myself a little bit while I'm here. And yeah, just like it was like super intense. Like you never like the sheer workload. I used to joke all the time because I only went 2 years. It's a 3-year school. I only went 2 years. I dropped out. But I still did okay. I think so. But yeah, like you basically you learn how to do like time management and stuff like that, and you get so much stuff in your like you get so much stuff to do. It's so many different, like they're just throwing stuff at you and seeing what sticks. Like in second year we had, I think it was basically like we had a week to do about 8 X-Men pages, and it was very intense. I found and it was like, oh, you can, it was an open script where it was like, oh, you can, but at least you can make choose your own characters. Because I had like the worst, like what could be like not the worst team, but like it was a very me team, because it was like Dazzler and Kitty Pryde and I want to say Longshot or something just to be cute. And it was very 80s team. It was great. But yeah, no, it's like just like the variety of stuff and just like the intensity that you're having it go into was just like a lot. Like it definitely, once you get out of Kubert School, it's like, I don't want to look at a pencil or paper ever again. And a lot of people don't, like they just need to take off like a year or so just to be able to process all of the information that they've learned, where it's just like buffering.
So is that where, because one of the things about you, Paige, is that you have a very distinct, not obviously an art style, but also a brand as well.
Oh yeah.
And where was that during that school is where you kind of, you discovered that brand, or did you have that before going into Kubrick School?
I actually like the Paigey brand. with like all the like I actually didn't start really getting into that until after Kubert school. Like when I was at Kubert school, I actually all of my drawings were very decidedly more dark, and heroin chic was a big thing. And I was kind of into that. Like I drew like very like gaunt like punk rock types that look like they'd like sooner stick you with a switchblade. um and then I think it wasn't until like after Kubert school when I started to like kind of focus on, like, I moved back to my parents' house and I was like, I'm going to focus on me. And I actually started doing like a lot of cosplay and stuff. Like I was going to a lot of anime conventions and doing a lot of cosplay. And this was yeah, like this was like the early aughts, late 90s, early aughts, and got really into like cosplay with like a bunch of my girlfriends and stuff like that, where we'd like do like cute girl versions of our favorite characters and stuff. Like, and through that it was like, oh, like dressing up is fun, but it's also very expensive. However, I could also just draw a picture of a cute girl in whatever outfit, and then maybe even try and like make a little money on the side. Because this was also before like cosplay became like the business that it is now, where it's like you can actually like make decent money if you figure out like your niche and stuff. Like I was way more into the whole hemorrhaging money thing myself. But yeah, no, and it was like like it was, yeah, like like with cosplay it was like I was still trying to like channel like the whole cute girl thing, but I didn't quite put the whole cute girl pinup-y thing and like my artwork together yet. I was like cute pinup-y girl thing me. And all, and it's like, well, yeah, which works too, but then it's also like you can make it into your art and you can make it into yourself, so it just becomes this whole pinup girl synergy thing going on.
And so what is your what's your some of your inspiration is because as you talked about before, we mentioned earlier, is that you're like kind of like that mid-century style. Do you kind of gravitate more towards, as you said, like the pinup, like plain bomber stuff, more of the 1950s? So you kind of, so some of your style kind of, is reminiscent of both like the 40s, 50s, and early 60s, seems to all kind of amalgamate together a bit.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I would definitely say, yeah, it's like a lot of the pinup stuff, especially when you're starting to get into pinup and all. I got like all the like the Gil Elfgren books and like the Taschen 1000 pinups books and stuff like that. Especially since I worked at right after Kubert school, I actually ended up working at Hot Topic for about 4 years in management. And with that, I was exposed to like way more different kinds of music than I was used to, which like so I was like exposed to like punk, like way more punk and like a lot of rockabilly and like tattoo culture and stuff like that, which like lends itself into a lot of like the pinup stuff. And yeah, like kind of like the rock and roll element of it definitely like appealed to me, with like all of like the stand up basses and like the Stray Cats type stuff. Um and also like, which also came back into like I grew up 10 minutes south of Baltimore in Glen Burnie. And what's it called, growing up in Maryland, you also have like a certain amount of pride and all for our hometown homie, John Waters, who does a lot of like rockabilly type stuff, like Crybaby, especially like that came out when I was a kid, and that was like when like Johnny Depp was like still like wasn't it hadn't become a parody of himself. But yeah, no, and it's like all of the rockabilly culture and stuff from that it like all kind of just started to like funnel down into like these are my interests. and my interests become me, or I am one with my interests now.
So if, it sounds as though it's like as you over the years, as you kind of defined your style and your brand, it's you seem to have started to gravitate more towards, you're starting to see the things that fit within the things that you really were passionate about, as you talked about before, is that like going, Hot Topic, you had the rockabilly culture, and uh, and through that you're, and then as you mentioned, or being from Baltimore, because you bring up a good point with the John Waters, like Hairspray, some of
Oh
these,
yeah.
I mean, all that stuff really is reminiscent of that mid-century, that mid-century style.
Yeah,
And
it's like all the kitsch.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's like all the trashy greatness.
so talk to us a little bit about, so we're talking about your brand, but let's get a little bit, dive a little bit deeper into how you developed your actual style. Yeah. So like your style itself, it's not hard edged, it's not dark, as you say, it's
Oh yeah.
some of your stuff, it does have that mid-century feel to it, but that can be very wide ranged. So what made you decide on your specific style that seemed, it seemed like uh, more welcoming and cartoony than it is dark and edgy, like you'd see in like the 1950s, like horror comics, for instance?
Oh yeah. Well, I noticed once I started doing conventions more. Once I shifted from doing conventions like merely as like a vessel for doing cosplay, and then I came to like the decision probably around 2006 2007 that I need to start table vending, and I need to start like showing my artwork to people, which is nice, especially compare like with like before when I would go around. I used to go around with like a portfolio and try and show that to editors and stuff like that in an attempt to get, I guess, like a mainstream comics job or something, which I kind of also came to the realization of just like, it's not really too much for me. It's like if I got invited, sure, but I'm not gonna like, that's not really the kind of niche thing. Like I'm a little too like, that was always like kind of my thing with comics was like I'm too mainstream in my style for the independent stuff, like the weird independent stuff, like as opposed to, but then I'm too weird for the mainstream stuff. So it's like I kind of had to carve my own niche in there with my pinup stuff. And what's it called? It's basically like with stuff like Artist Alley and the appeal of Artist Alley, it was that, oh, I can basically just rent this table, set all my stuff out, and just let people come to me and tell me what they think, or say, I like this, I would like to exchange your goods for money. And I'm like, great, even better. Um, but then it's like you also, but one of the big things that I noticed, because when I started doing conventions was also around the time that I started to like really find my voice in art, which was also like in the mid aughts, when also like roller derby was becoming very like starting to like ramp up and get really popular. And like the Charm City Roller Girls like were definitely one of my first big jumps into getting my artwork out there and getting feedback on it and stuff, and having like a very enthusiastic uh, like, and the beginnings of like an enthusiastic fandom of my stuff where it's just like, yes, yes, we love it, and I'll do more posters for us. And I'm like, okay, just say nice things to me and tell me I'm pretty. But yeah, so it was. And then there's also like a lot of like crossover when you start getting into like roller derby stuff and like comic stuff, and just like the rock and roll rockabilly. Like a lot of roller girls have like this cool tattooed like girl power type thing going on that I found very attractive. And then it was like through them and like through like getting more into comic books, you definitely are getting more into like pinups and stuff. You definitely start seeing like this softening of my work where it's like, oh, I'm starting to draw like a variety of body types because I started going to roller derby practice sessions and doing life drawing. And I did like a whole series of all of like the first year, or like a lot of the first year, like Charm City Roller Girls roster, which was like mostly like excellent practice for me in doing like portraits and doing different body types and stuff. And like, and then that, and it's like the whole little trick I do where I do pictures of certain people, and then they're like, look at what they drew for me, or look at what she drew for me. And then it's like, oh, I would like one of those too. And it's like, yeah, you can have one for money. Like, that one for your friend was a freebie. I would like to be paid now.
Exactly. We just saw. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, all right. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's like doing all that stuff definitely like started like, there was, yeah, like I said, like there was like a softening of my work. And I also I started doing posters, which also I started incorporating typography into my work. Which became like, I definitely started seeing more of like the relationship between words and pictures and stuff, especially with when me and my husband started dating, and he is an award-winning graphic designer. So I and then like we traded thoughts and ideas because we also went to Kubert school together, so we both have that kind of mindset of like everything that we look at is like, oh, what did this right, what did this wrong, what can we learn from this type thing when it comes to art and design and stuff like that. So it was like, oh, like you have this whole skill set that I am not familiar about, so I will now learn from you and then incorporate that into my stuff and grow as an artist.
So did you gravitate, as you mentioned about the typography and learning the fonts piece of it, that did you see that kind of complement your style, or did you see it kind of expand a bit your portfolio as a professional?
Both. Like I definitely, once I started doing excuse me. Once I started doing like derby posters and stuff, I started to kind of teach myself like different poster design. It's like where do you like, because it's like when you have typography, like you start to get into like sets of rules and stuff like that, and it's like, oh, well, I have to put the title of the thing up top and it needs to be bigger, and then like you have like but like with like derby posters, it's like, oh, well, like you start like thinking in a different way. It's like kind of like slightly more left brain, as opposed to like, I'm just gonna draw trees and stars and girls and just whatever comes out of my brain, as opposed to like typography. It's like, okay, well, there's rules, and we need to like allot so much space for this, and we have our title, and we're going to use like the title's going to look like this, and then there's like, well, what time is the event, where is the event, where do we put this information? Like there's like the transference of information that you get with typography of like, well, if there's words here, the words need to say something, so what are they saying? What's the most important thing that they're saying? Where it's like, yeah, like give me all the copy so I can break it down, sort of thing. But then it's like, taking that and then finding the harmony of that with the artwork. Because you have like, I had I did a series of tattoo festival posters for a Visionary Tattoo Arts Festival that are all that, like, you can see those in my portfolio, but it's like like making things fit, figuring out where everything goes, having that like, oh, I want the text to wrap around her leg so I could still show her foot, sort of thing.
So how is it? So how many tattoos have you designed?
I've done a few like tattoos. I've never done the actual machine.
Right.
Like I've done a few like tattoos where it's like I basically drew out the flash and then had people take that to their tattoo artist, and they've done like excellent jobs at like recreating my artwork on somebody's skin. I've had a lot of people like quite a few people have gotten like artwork of mine, like where they've asked permission for an already existing piece of artwork if they could get it tattooed on them. I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, you want to get that, you want to get it on your body forever, that's totally cool with me. Like, I am honored. Thank you.
And you, yeah, I was just wondering, like, how much pressure is that to actually, I mean, it's, as they always say, like, art is, art, the art we do is basically, it's passing, but you're doing something that's other than like an oil painting or a stone sculpture, you can't get very much more permanent than actually a tattoo. As you mentioned, is there a lot of pressure on that, or is it just, or you're just kind of like, you know, you see that more as a sign of, as you say, like a extreme honor?
I mean, I definitely see it as an extreme honor. Like, I myself, I am my own worst critic. I would never get my own artwork tattooed on me because I'm already like, I can't even post, I rarely can post pictures on Instagram or Facebook without, like, literally as soon as I post a picture that I drew on Facebook or Instagram or something, uh, it's like, it's like I hit post and then something on the picture just shifts and I'm like, God damn it, or dang nabbit, I don't know how what our rating system is on here, but dang nabbit, I got that hand wrong. I could have made their foot like 10% smaller or something. It's like, yeah, it's like, oh, their eyes appear now. How did that happen? Oh, I had been drawing that the entire time. Like, it's definitely, and that's kind of like my thing with my artwork is that it's constantly evolving, and it's constantly like it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. So it's like, I don't want to there's still stuff of mine that I love. Like, I have plenty of stuff that I'm like, yeah, I did this, I'm feeling it, and but at the same time, I could also look at that artwork in like 10 years and be like, woof, woof. Oh, honey, no. Baby girl, what are you thinking?
So, talk to us a bit about your process. I know I noticed, like, you did a YouTube video tutorial on Adobe Illustrator. Do you
Oh
still?
my God, yes, I
Yeah,
did.
yeah. See, I do my research. Did you?
Yeah.
Do you still? And by the way, Darth Sato James Coombs the Fourth just said, 10 years, my favorite artist. He said that in chat.
Oh, thank you.
Did you? Yeah. So talk about us. What's your mode of artwork? What's your process?
Well, I do like kind of like a mishmash of digital and traditional. Traditional being like pencil, paper, eraser, like physical media. But I've been slowly starting to like transfer a lot of that transfer more into digital media. Like, I got a Cintiq tablet, like one of those like big LCD screens that you can like draw directly into Photoshop and stuff with. I've had one of those now for about 2 years, And I think I'm starting to get a handle on it. Because that's kind of the thing where it's just like, with because I still draw with paper. I have about like sketchbooks going back from 1997.
Mm.
Probably about 25-30 sketchbooks. And I still love my sketchbooks. I'm always like, I sit on the couch while I'm watching TV and like doodle like dumb little faces and stuff. Or usually I also I'll start the beginning of a picture in my sketchbook, and then I'll like take a picture of it with my phone, or I'll just outright scan it and then bring that sketch into the computer, and then draw digitally on top of that to kind of like do stuff like that. I notice like when I post things of like, oh, that head is weird, or yeah, like I have a tendency to initially draw everybody's head probably about 20% bigger than it should be, because I think that's a lot of my cartooning background. And it's like I definitely like, it feels like paper is more forgiving, as opposed to like with a Cintiq and with digital art, there's like this expectation for perfection that at least I have, because there's so many options. Like when I did traditional media, or I worked exclusively in traditional media, like markers and stuff like that. It was like you had limitations of like, well, I can only afford 20 colors, so I guess I better make this work. As opposed to, do you want this to look like watercolor? Do you want this to look like charcoal? Do you want this to look like, do you want this to look like Zipatone? Oh, you don't like any of that? Undo, undo, undo. And infinite erasing. Like, as opposed to now, like even now, like in my sketchbook, I'm just like, oh, this paper is getting real pulpy. Like, like where you start erasing and the paper starts coming off with it, and then you start to have to do surgery and get out Post-its and stuff like that. Oh, or it's like, no, I erased too soon, or I wish I could go back about 20 steps. I erased it too soon. It was actually okay.
So like, say for instance, if somebody, like, a commission that you've done, like when you've done your, say like one of your like burlesque show posters, what's the process with that? Would you first sit down with the exact size paper that you would do, or would you just do it all digitally, or how would you go about that?
Well, with a lot of this, a lot of the stuff that I was doing with the burlesque posters, usually I haven't worked to size in probably about at least 20 years. Even when I was working exclusively traditional, I didn't really have any jobs or any like actual professional exchanges to worry about. I was just like drawing stuff like or whatever. By the time that I had started doing stuff like professionally, I was about half traditional, half digital, where I would draw the initial figures and ink the initial figures in by hand with pen, and then I would scan that and then go bring that into Photoshop and color it thusly. Which that's the nice thing with drawing digitally, is that you don't have to draw to size. You just got to make sure you get that DPI pumped up. But yeah, no, it's like with my posters and stuff, it's like you kind of like work out with what the client wants, like what kind of feeling the client wants to have, or if there's like a theme or something like that. I love a theme. And yeah, you just you don't actually start working to size until laying it out digitally. And even then, it's like you can zoom and scale till your heart's content.
And so what do you, as you mentioned, like do you usually do 300 DPI, or what's your normal DPI?
Yeah, I do 300 DPI minimum.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's like, yeah, it's like 300 DPI is like the minimum for print.
And do you, and so as we talked about from a digital perspective, and you mentioned the aesthetic, so do you stick with Photoshop, use Illustrator for like a vector based, or do you work with other programs?
I just started using Manga Studio, or it's I believe, yeah, it's a Manga
Clip
Studio.
Studio? Oh, okay.
Yeah, Clip Studio, Clip
Okay.
Studio.
Clip Studio
Um,
Paint. Okay.
I just started using that. I was primarily like strictly Adobe girl and was using Photoshop and Illustrator, like Photoshop for all of my coloring, and Illustrator for my for stuff like typography and like design stuff and like things like that. With but then once I've only started using Clip Studio for probably like the past 2 years since I got the Cintiq, because I've been starting to use that for my inking. Because before that I would just use like micron pens and ink directly onto the actual drawing on paper. But now but now it's like, oh, you again with like there's the expectation of perfection because there's just so many options. It's like, oh, what brushes are you using, or like what size brush is that, what kind of brush is that, did you download this kind? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just trying to make it curve nice.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about your, as I said, out of, a lot of the people out there, you've been really successful with the branding aspect of what you do. What kind of advice would you give to people who are trying to kind of get out there with artists, or whether it be cartooning or illustration, or any type of medium of art? What would be some of the advice that you would give folks on the branding aspect?
Well, it's like if you're branding, if it depends on how much of like yourself you want to put into your into your artwork and into your brand. I am my brand is me. um like I kind of just fell into the whole like uh me like me becoming my own brand. It was like I didn't like I wouldn't say, oh, it's toughy. I would say that like definitely like keeping like a genuineness to it. Like you don't need to like put on like a whole fake personality. It's like just be yourself. If yourself isn't great, maybe work on yourself a little bit first.
Okay.
um but yeah, no, I mean, it's like just like being genuine, like being a good person to work with, like letting your work speak for itself is also like it's like you can be as you can charm your way into if you're not you can charm your way into doing work, but if your work isn't particularly good, then it's like you're going to be the person that's like, oh, they're nice, but their stuff is like which it's like you definitely like want like working on your stuff and then making sure your stuff is like your product is good and well put together. I mean, I definitely had like a lot with me and how a lot of my branding like ties into like myself and like the Paige brand, the Paige experience, especially like when I was doing like convention tables and stuff, which, wow, fun, is completely exhausting because it's just like everybody wants to have the pay, like everybody gets to have like a little conversation. Let's do a little bit together. It'll be fun. I got a lot of that from working retail because I worked retail for about 5 years after curate school, and with that, I sold stereos. I worked at Hot Topic, and it really just like got me into being able to talk to people and have conversations and kind of like just like ease up in front of people and stuff, and be able to like, I don't know, put people at ease and like try not to be weird.
But yeah, that's a good. Chelsea just said sage advice, and Fenny said,
Oh, Chelsea.
yeah, Fenny said, art auntie giving all the advice. So that's good.
Art auntie. Yes, I am the art auntie.
And so yeah, I think basically as you're saying is that you're making sure that the brand should reflect kindness and genuinely good professionalism when it comes to your the art as well. And
Yeah.
there's some artists, and we probably know, we could probably name 10 off the top of our heads who are really good artists, but don't who are
Oh,
really
but
good
they're
artists,
garbage people.
or they just don't even talk. They don't even talk to anyone when they're at conventions. They kind of like keep their head down, and
Oh, yeah.
so yeah.
That was actually a conundrum I had when I was really into doing like, I was really in the thick of doing convention tables and stuff, was that I had this conundrum where I was basically like, you can see like old pictures of like my convention table and stuff. I had so much merchandise. It was like, I had basically just channeled my own little cagey hot topic into like into a 6 foot table. And it was like, I had all this stuff, but then and it was like and it was just such a struggle to be able to like make like $20 here for a couple prints and like $5 here for a print or for a necklace or something. And then it's like you've got other guys around that are just like not talking to anybody, just drawing commission sketches, just like shoop shoop shoop, here you go, here's Aquaman, here's Blue Beetle, here's friggin' Wonder Woman, and on, like not having to talk to anybody. And it was like I tried doing that for like 2 shows, and I felt so bad because it was like, because that's a whole big thing too that I always had with my convention tables, was I was constantly standing because I wanted to be able to greet people like at eye level, and like eye contact is like a very big thing, especially in sales and stuff like that, as I learned from like my very Glengarry Glen Ross style of stereo selling that I had right after college, my little stint doing in that nightmare. um but I learned good things from that, where it was just like, oh, like eye contact and like leaving yourself open and all, like you're not like closed, like, because it's like when you're drawing and stuff, it's like people are afraid to come up to you because they don't want to bother you. And I noticed that immediately as soon as I started doing commission sketches at shows, was that like once I started like with my head down, I could not, it's like I couldn't greet people, like people would be all like not want to ask me things or stuff like that. And I was just like, this is not ideal. So it was definitely like you kind of have to like pick and choose, or it's like or at least I had to like kind of figure out and pick and choose how I wanted to go about this. um but yeah.
And if I remember correctly, you did some of your style of 1950s with superheroes. Didn't you do one with like the X-Men with Rogue and
Oh, I did. Those were fun. I still
Cyclops?
want to do those. I have so many ideas. Yeah, I did like a rockabilly rogue, and it was super cool. This one girl actually did a whole cosplay of it. It was amazing. Blew my whole mind. And yeah, like Psychobilly Gambit and like Roller Derby Dazzler and stuff like that. That was like my like whole take on it, because that was always one of my big dreams, was to draw X-Men stuff. And that it was like, well, if I could do it, it'd be all like subcultural, like all punk rock fringe stuff, which would be neat. Um,
So
but
when you did commissions, would you say, listen, if you want to do a commission, then this is what it's going to look like. How would that work? Because of somebody that has a very specific style, that when you did commissions, would you basically would you kind of do that preamble by telling people what the expectation is on that, or?
I mean, I would definitely like when I do commissions or when I do a series of commissions, I try to do a couple for myself of just I'll just draw like a couple characters that I feel like drawing right now. And then I'll be like put an announcement out or whatever and be like, look, you want me to draw something, I can draw something for you, but it's going to be in this style because I've got that all planned out in my head now. And it's like, I can do those kind of without thinking about it too much, which means that you get it quicker because I'm somewhat notoriously slow. I think I'm slow. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, it's that. And then I also got the bright idea at a couple shows to do the commissions beforehand and then have them at the table for them to pick up, because it's like, it also depends on because I do different types of commissions, like where it was like convention commissions I would do on paper, physical media, like you have the only original picture of this. Like I might have like a snapshot from my phone camera that I posted on Instagram, but it's like I'm not running prints of this. Like this is it for you. Like, or this is like you have like the only copy. Versus like if like stuff like my portrait commissions and stuff like that, and a lot of the commissions I do now at home, it's like I do them like pretty much entirely digital, and then I'll actually just send off the print file to the person and be like, here you go, enjoy your picture, printing is your problem now. I mean, I will also be like, well, if you want to get it printed, I have like my Society 6 page and stuff like that. Like if you want, if like you don't know if you don't know where to go, I can send you places. But otherwise, it's also just like this is now out of my hands. You go do it.
Because you did mention, one of the things you've been working on lately are those American traditional portrait series that you've started doing as commissions.
Yes.
And I highly recommend folks check them out. And that Paige Pumphrey carbonmade.com is your main website now, correct?
Yes.
And on there, and we'll have a link in the show notes for it for everybody to see as well. And so where did that idea come from? Because one of the things I love about your style is that it's not cartoony, it's not caricature. You actually kind of embrace people's personalities through those pictures, but it's done in an extremely tasteful way.
Oh, thank you. I had a bad like there was that episode of The Simpsons where Lisa got the really mean caricature made of herself. I totally had one of those experiences when I was an awkward teenager, and I made a promise to myself that anytime I drew a portrait of someone, I wasn't gonna like embarrass them. So I try to make everybody cute and pretty and like their best selves.
And so how long have you been doing? I see that seems to have been taken off for you, right? You've done a lot
Yeah,
of
no,
those.
I've been I started doing them early last year because it ended up being the first one that I did was a wedding present for my friend Maria that I used to do convention tables with. And it was like, ooh, like it kind of like the thing that I was saying before, where it was like, I could do these commissions where it's like it's minimal thought, because that's always the thing that takes the longest with when you're working on like a picture or design, is just like the pulling forth of it out of the air, like the birthing of it into the universe, where it's like, oh, I need a what's it called? I need like a completely original new idea, the new hot idea. What's it going to be? Something no one's seen before. But then it's also like there's a comfort in like having a formula for things where it's like, oh, well, I can like headshot, like, because everybody loves pictures of themselves. I don't care who you are, you love it. But like, yeah, like headshot, name banner, and then you get to pick like your favorite flower and all. So it's like there's also like a degree of interactivity with it with the customer of like, well, what's your favorite flower? Oh, pansies, cool. I'll look them up real quick and all. And it's kind of fun too because I get to learn how to draw flowers.
Yeah. No, they're fantastic,
Oh,
and
thank
I
you.
think what I'll end up doing too is when I YouTube video this, I'll try to add that to the show notes as well for people to look at some of those pictures.
Oh yeah,
So
definitely.
wow, we got 5 minutes left. This went quick.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. High
So
fives and I'm gabbing about myself.
so tell the audience where they can follow you and where they can find your work.
You can follow me on my the best place to follow me right now is on my Instagram, which is Paige underscore Pumphrey. There you can see stuff like progress pictures of whatever it is I'm working on, if I can show them. I also do like my monthly 1 second every day videos that are very popular that everyone likes because it's like a little window into my life for like 1 second every day for a month. I try to do those on like the first of the month. It's like and I also post a lot about Animal Crossing because I love Animal Crossing. It's my new going out. It's great therapy. And yeah, and then it's also like just like me like going out, hanging out, wearing silly outfits with my friends when we used to be able to go places and do things, and hopefully there'll be a return to that at some point. But yeah, and then I'm also on Facebook. I'm also on Facebook under Paige Pumphrey. It's like you can like follow me and friend me on there. I mean, I don't really have anything new right now that like any projects I'm currently promoting that I think I can talk about. Um, but yeah, no, and you can buy the manga I letter. I'm lettering or buy the manga that I letter. I've been lettering Ghosts in the Shell, the Human Algorithm, and lettering Rent a Girlfriend. And I also helped with lettering the Eisner Award-winning Tokyo Terror Reva Girls.
Ooh.
Which is very cute. And yeah, like, and also stuff like Interview with Monster Girls and stuff whenever that comes back from hiatus. And yeah, no, it's like, I think that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah, like my social media, and I'm on Twitter as well. Like you can go to my portfolio site and you can see all of my social media connections there. So I can be part of your life and you see me every day.
Your friend Lisa Franco says you're a great artist and have an awesome personality.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hair top. Thanks, wink.
All right. Well, thank you very much. This has been exciting. This has been some good information, and I think for those out there who want to learn more about, how to do some, how to work on your branding style and how to do that, I think that you just gave some pretty good sage-like advice on what people need to do. So tell me, what was some of your favorite cartoons growing up then that you really latched onto?
Oh yeah. Well, definitely rock and roll was my big thing. Like I watched that I watched it when like my parents I think rented it in the early days of video rental. And I really probably shouldn't have watched it at that age, but it yeah, that definitely had a lasting impact on me as a child. And then I actually didn't see it again until I was about 12 years old at Blockbuster Video. And then I rented the video like all the time. And I probably should have stolen the VHS tape. because I think I actually even had like a very serious conversation with like one of the cashiers or something where I was like, if you guys ever sell this, here's my number. You need to call me because I'll buy it. When it's like, I should have just kept it. But then my parents probably would have been super pissed because it'd be like, you ruined our credit because you kept that funny animal movie.